Hello, everyone, and welcome. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge something. Most health content you see online is designed to scare you. Alarming headlines, dramatic warnings, worst case scenarios presented as inevitable outcomes. That is not what we are doing here today. What we are doing is taking a close, honest, scientifically grounded look at a very specific dietary habit that the research tells us poses a real and underappreciated risk. Not a theoretical one, not a sensationalized one, a real one. And we are going to talk about it calmly, clearly, and practically. I'm Naomi Chapelton, and today we are going to talk about something that I genuinely believe most people have never thought twice about: reheating food. Yes, reheating. That thing you do every single day when you pull last night's dinner out of the fridge, toss it in the microwave, press a few buttons, and eat it without a second thought. And I completely understand why. We are busy, we are tired, we cook once, and we want to eat twice, or 3 times, or however many times it takes to finish the pot. That is normal. That is human. But here's what I need you to understand before we go any further. Not all foods behave the same way when heat is applied to them a second time. Some foods undergo chemical changes when reheated that produce compounds known to be harmful to the human body, and in several cases, specifically linked to increased risk of pancreatic cancer, one of the most aggressive and difficult to treat cancers we know of. So today, I want to walk you through 5 specific foods that you need to stop reheating, explain exactly what happens to them at the molecular level when you do, and give you practical, evidence-based alternatives so you never have to guess again. Let's get into it. First, I want to give you a little bit of background on why this matters so much, because I think when people understand the mechanism, the actual biology, they are far more motivated to change their habits than when someone just says, "Don't do this." The pancreas is a glandular organ that sits behind your stomach, and it has 2 major jobs. The first is producing digestive enzymes that break down the food you eat. The second is producing hormones, most famously insulin, that regulate your blood sugar. Pancreatic cancer occurs when the cells of the pancreas begin to grow and divide uncontrollably. One of the reasons it is so dangerous is that it tends to be asymptomatic in its early stages, which means by the time most patients notice something is wrong, the disease has already progressed significantly. The 5-year survival rate for pancreatic cancer is among the lowest of any cancer, roughly 11 to 12% overall, though this varies by stage. Now, what causes pancreatic cancer? Like all cancers, it is multifactorial. Genetics, smoking, obesity, chronic pancreatitis, and diet all play roles. And diet, specifically the repeated ingestion of certain heat-generated compounds, is an area of active and growing research. When certain foods are exposed to high temperatures, particularly for a second or third time, they produce or concentrate chemicals that fall into categories like nitrosamines, advanced glycation end products, heterocyclic amines, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and oxidized lipids. These are not small, obscure concerns. These are well-documented chemical families with known carcinogenic properties, and several of them have been directly studied in relation to pancreatic tissue. With that foundation in place, let us talk about the 5 foods. The first food is processed and cured meats, things like bacon, sausage, hot dogs, deli ham, salami, pepperoni, and similar products. Now, even before reheating, these foods already carry a significant health burden. They are preserved using nitrates and nitrites, which are chemical compounds added to extend shelf life and maintain color. When you heat these meats, the nitrites react with amino acids, the building blocks of protein, and form compounds called nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are potent carcinogens. They are classified as probable human carcinogens by the International Agency for Research on Cancer. When you reheat these meats a second time, you are essentially driving that reaction further. You are creating more nitrosamines with each heat cycle, and you are concentrating them because some of the water evaporates. leaving you with a higher ratio of these compounds per gram of food. Studies have shown that populations with high processed meat consumption have significantly elevated rates of colorectal cancer, and emerging research continues to link nitrosamine exposure to pancreatic carcinogenesis. The advice here is straightforward. Do not cook processed meats in bulk and reheat them. If you are going to eat bacon or sausage, cook only what you will eat immediately, and try to limit the frequency of consumption to begin with. The second food is rice, and this one surprises almost everyone. You might be thinking, rice? Plain white rice? What could possibly be dangerous about reheating rice? And the concern here is actually twofold. The first issue involves a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. This organism is naturally present in the environment, and its spores can survive cooking. When cooked rice is left to cool at room temperature, these spores can germinate and multiply rapidly, producing toxins that cause food poisoning. That is the immediate food safety concern. But the second issue is the one more directly relevant to our discussion today. When starchy foods like rice are cooked and then cooled, the starch undergoes a structural change called retrogradation. It essentially reforms into crystalline structures that are harder to digest. When you then reheat that rice, particularly at high temperatures, you can promote the formation of advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. AGEs are formed when sugars react with proteins or fats under heat, and they have been associated with chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, and increased cancer risk. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now recognized as a key driver of pancreatic carcinogenesis. The pancreatic cells, under constant inflammatory stress, become more susceptible to the kind of DNA damage that initiates tumor growth. The recommendation for rice is to either eat it freshly cooked, or, if you must store it, cool it rapidly, within 1 hour, and store it in the refrigerator. When you do reheat it, make sure it reaches a core temperature of at least 73 degrees Celsius or 165 degrees Fahrenheit, and do not reheat it more than once. The third food is eggs, and again, this is one that catches people off guard because we think of eggs as a health food, a breakfast staple, a source of high-quality protein. And all of that is true when eggs are prepared correctly. The problem arises with reheating. Eggs contain high levels of protein, and proteins are sensitive to heat. When you cook an egg, you denature those proteins. You unfold them from their natural three-dimensional structure. When you then apply heat a second time, particularly at higher temperatures, those already denatured proteins continue to transform. Specifically, the sulfur-containing amino acids in egg protein, things like methionine and cysteine, can break down and produce hydrogen sulfide compounds. More importantly for our purposes, reheating eggs, especially scrambled eggs and fried eggs, at high temperatures has been shown to generate heterocyclic amines, or HCAs. HCAs are mutagenic compounds. They damage DNA. They have been classified as possible to probable human carcinogens, and they have been specifically linked to cancers of the pancreas, colon, and breast. The risk is particularly elevated when eggs are reheated in a pan at very high temperatures or in a microwave without moisture. The practical guidance here is simple. Cook your eggs fresh. Eggs take 3 to 5 minutes to prepare from scratch. There is really no culinary shortcut worth the trade-off in this case. If you have leftover cooked eggs, incorporate them into something cold, a salad for example, rather than reheating them. The fourth food is spinach, and I want to spend a little extra time here because the mechanism is one that most people have genuinely never heard of, and it is fascinating from a biochemical standpoint. Spinach is extraordinarily rich in nitrates, natural nitrates, not the synthetic kind added to processed meats, but nitrates nonetheless. The body converts dietary nitrates to nitrites through a process involving bacteria in the mouth and gut. Under normal circumstances, nitrites can actually be beneficial, serving as a source of nitric oxide, which supports cardiovascular health. However, when spinach is reheated, especially at high temperatures, these nitrates and nitrites interact with the proteins in the spinach and with any proteins present in a mixed dish. This can again generate nitrosamines, the same carcinogenic compounds we discussed in the context of processed meats. Additionally, spinach is high in iron, and when you repeatedly heat iron-rich foods, you promote oxidative reactions. Oxidative stress, the imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants in the body, is one of the primary mechanisms by which healthy cells transition toward a cancerous phenotype. The pancreas is particularly vulnerable to oxidative stress because it naturally generates a significant amount of reactive oxygen species during the process of producing digestive enzymes. When you add external sources of oxidative load through diet, you tip that balance further in the wrong direction. The recommendation is to eat spinach raw or lightly steamed and consumed immediately. If you cook spinach into a dish, a pasta, a soup, a frittata, eat it the same day and do not reheat leftovers that contain it. Fresh spinach requires no reheating and delivers its full nutritional profile when eaten raw. The fifth food is chicken, and this is perhaps the most consequential one on this list, simply because of how common the behavior is. Meal prepping with chicken has become enormously popular over the past decade. People cook large batches of chicken breast on Sunday and eat it throughout the week. And on the surface, this seems like a brilliant strategy for healthy eating. The problem is that chicken is extremely high in protein, and protein-dense foods are uniquely prone to the formation of heterocyclic amines when exposed to high heat. With chicken, there is an additional layer of concern: the fat content. Chicken, particularly skin-on portions and dark meat, contains significant amounts of fat. When fat is repeatedly heated to high temperatures, it undergoes a process called lipid oxidation. Oxidized fats produce peroxides, aldehydes, and other reactive compounds that are cytotoxic. They damage cell membranes and DNA. One specific compound, malondialdehyde, is a well-established marker of oxidative stress and has been directly linked to pancreatic cancer in multiple epidemiological studies. Moreover, reheating chicken in a microwave creates uneven heating, meaning some portions reach temperatures high enough to drive these reactions aggressively, while others remain cooler, giving any bacteria present in those cooler zones a chance to survive. The advice here is not to give up chicken. It is a lean, nutrient-dense protein source that has a clear place in a healthy diet. The advice is to change how you use your leftovers. Instead of reheating cold chicken in the microwave or on the stovetop, eat it cold. Cold chicken in a salad, sliced cold over roasted vegetables, or shredded cold into a wrap with fresh vegetables. All of these are not just safer options, they are genuinely delicious. And your pancreas will thank you. Now, I want to take a step back and address something that I know is on some of your minds. You might be thinking, people have been reheating food for generations. Your grandmother reheated everything. Your parents reheated everything. And plenty of people seem fine. So is this really a meaningful risk? And that is a fair and intelligent question. Here is the honest answer. Cancer is probabilistic, not deterministic. Not every person who reheats these foods will develop pancreatic cancer, just as not every smoker develops lung cancer. But the research is clear that exposure to these compounds, nitrosamines, HCAs, AGEs, oxidized lipids, increases the probability of carcinogenic events occurring in the cells of the pancreas and other organs. And when we are talking about a cancer with an 11% 5-year survival rate, even a modest reduction in risk through dietary behavior change is worth taking seriously. We also have to think about cumulative exposure. One reheated bowl of fried rice is not going to give you cancer. But reheating rice, reheating chicken, reheating spinach dishes, eating processed meats regularly, these behaviors compound over years and decades. The carcinogenic compounds they generate accumulate in the body. The inflammatory burden they create is ongoing, and the pancreas, sitting quietly behind your stomach doing its job, absorbs that burden day after day. Before we move to practical recommendations, I want to briefly address one more thing: the role of how food is stored before reheating, because this is just as important as the reheating itself. Many of the most dangerous chemical transformations that occur during reheating are actually initiated or accelerated during improper storage. When food is left uncovered in the refrigerator, it is exposed to oxygen, which drives lipid oxidation even at cold temperatures. When food is stored in plastic containers that are not BPA-free, heat-sensitive compounds from the plastic can leach into the food. And then, when you microwave that food in the same container, you compound the problem dramatically. Always store leftovers in glass or stainless steel containers. Always cover them tightly to minimize oxidative exposure. And always label them with the date so you never eat something that has been sitting for longer than 2 days. These habits seem small, but they represent a meaningful reduction in your overall chemical exposure load. I also want to briefly address the role of cooking method because it matters significantly. Microwaving, pan frying, and grilling during reheating all produce different risk profiles. Pan frying and grilling reheated foods at high temperatures are particularly problematic for HCA and PAH formation. These reactions require high direct heat. Microwaving tends to produce more uneven heating and is especially problematic for bacterial safety in foods like rice and chicken. Steaming and slow, gentle reheating in low-temperature ovens or in water baths are the safest methods when reheating is unavoidable. Though the fundamental recommendation remains: where possible, cook fresh and eat immediately. Let me give you some practical takeaways that you can implement starting today. 1. Cook proteins like chicken and fish in quantities you will consume in a single meal. 2. If you batch cook, store chicken and eggs cold and use them cold in salads or wraps rather than reheating. 3. Avoid buying processed meats altogether, or at minimum, cook only what you need immediately and never reheat them. 4. Cool cooked rice quickly and store it in the refrigerator. Reheat it only once to a safe temperature and add moisture when you do. 5. Use fresh spinach raw in salads and smoothies rather than cooking it repeatedly. 6. When reheating any food is necessary, use low and slow heat rather than blasting it in the microwave or searing it in a hot pan. 7. Eat a diet rich in antioxidants, fresh fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and whole grains to counterbalance any unavoidable oxidative load from dietary sources. 8. Stay well hydrated, because water supports the body's natural detoxification processes, including in the pancreas itself. 9. If you have a family history of pancreatic cancer or any gastrointestinal cancer, take these recommendations even more seriously and discuss your dietary habits with your physician. And 10. Get regular checkups. Pancreatic cancer caught early is vastly more treatable than pancreatic cancer caught late. Annual wellness visits give your doctor the opportunity to identify risk factors and address them before disease develops. I want to close by saying something that I think is important in the context of all health advice. The goal is never fear. The goal is never to make you anxious about every meal you eat. The goal is knowledge. When you understand why certain behaviors increase your risk, you are empowered to make different choices, not out of panic, but out of informed self-respect. You have one pancreas. It works incredibly hard every single day to keep you alive and functioning. It deserves the same level of consideration you give to the rest of your health. Today, you have learned that bacon and sausage form nitrosamines when reheated. You have learned that reheated rice generates AGEs and carries bacterial toxin risk. You have learned that reheated eggs produce heterocyclic amines. You have learned that spinach, when reheated, can generate nitrosamines and contributes to oxidative stress. And you have learned that reheated chicken, particularly when done at high heat, generates both HCAs and oxidized lipids linked directly to pancreatic cancer risk. That is 5 pieces of information that, acted upon consistently, could meaningfully reduce your lifetime cancer risk. Share this with someone you love. And if there is one thing I want you to walk away with today, just one, it is this: convenience is not worth your life. The 2 minutes you save by microwaving yesterday's scrambled eggs, the habit of batch cooking chicken and blasting it in the microwave every day for 5 days straight, the tendency to reheat the same pot of rice 4 times before it is finished. These feel like nothing individually, but they accumulate into a dietary pattern that the science tells us matters. You deserve better than that. Make the small changes. Cook a little fresher. Eat a little smarter. Build these habits not as restrictions, but as acts of self-care, because that is exactly what they are. Your future self will look back on the decisions you make today at the dinner table and be genuinely grateful that you took this seriously. And protect that remarkable, hardworking, irreplaceable organ sitting quietly behind your stomach every single day of your life. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm Naomi Chapelton, and I will see you next time.